storm chasers. And here I'm going to back up a little bit and talk about why I storm chase and why I started doing this, because that answers the #1 question people often have. Why do you do this crazy thing? Why would you drive towards something that is dangerous and every other smart person in the world is in the basement? It's really the fault of Caledonia. I grew up in New Jersey, where we had storms, but they weren't really impressive storms. And in the summers, we used to come and visit my grandma in Bern. I loved everything about Caledonia. I loved the A&W root beer stand that used to be there. I loved the water tower, which I thought was a big lollipop. And I loved the storms. And when the tornado sirens went off at night and we all had to go to the basement and my mom had her cigarettes and I had my candy cigarettes and we would watch the storms barrel by at the top of the stairs through the window there, I thought it was like the greatest thing ever. And maybe I had seen The Wizard of Oz too many times, but I think I felt as though I were in this great movie. And in fact, my first word in this world was siren. That's really because I was born in New York and we live near a hospital, but I like to think that it signifies my lifelong love of storms. Excuse me. So I've had this lifelong fascination, and when I was in my teens and 20s, I started storm chasing as an amateur, often with my captive driver, my mom. And my method of chasing then was to see a blob of radar on the Weather Channel and make her drive us toward it, with not very great results. Like, we would be in a ditch next to our car with a storm coming on and all the animals running in the other direction. We would get hail dents on the car. My mom would be actually pretty silent, which those of you who know her know is unusual, but she would be like paralyzed with fear with the situation that I'd gotten us into. So when I started researching storm chasers in earnest, I decided that it was kinder to her and less dangerous and would probably be more effective if I went with a professional storm chase company. So I found these guys. They work for a company called Tempest Tours, which is based in Arlington, Texas. And for the last 8 summers, I have been storm chasing with Tempest. I started out following them in my vehicle as a media tail, which means that I poached on their knowledge and expertise and their radar in exchange for writing about the company. But in the past 2 years, I've graduated to being a guide for the company, which means I now ride in the van with everybody who pays to see big weather up close and personal, and I tell our clients what's going on in the sky. And it's our job to get them as close as we can to big weather without putting them in danger. So it's been a pretty amazing ride. I found out from doing this what storm chasers really eat. And so you can see that it's not really the healthiest diet. In fact, in the lower right-hand corner of the screen, you can see what is fried corn on cob. God bless Texas. I ate it, and it was just as good as it looks. I also found out what happens when you're storm chasing and you need coffee and you try and make strong coffee in a Super 8 motel coffee pot using a Starbucks espresso pod, which is something that a lot of storm chasers would probably recognize. This last year, I graduated to using a French press, and it was much less explosive and dangerous. And I found what it really looks like in the back of Beyond. One of the things I love most about storm chasing is it takes you to these really remote areas of our country that most people never see, because you can only get there by hours and hours and hours of driving, hundreds and hundreds of miles. So that sort of Z-shaped storm in the top left corner is dying spectacularly over North Dakota. My little pinwheel, my homemade anemometer there is in Oklahoma. The vans under the storm is in the high, lonely plains of northeast Colorado. And the real pinwheel, gosh, my brain just totally deserted me, but you know what that is. Thank you, the windmill, thank you, is in Cherry County, Nebraska, as is that Valentine Motel sign. And I was so struck by the beauty and the diversity of the landscape that I started to take pictures. And at first, I started this with a Canon camera that I inherited from an old boyfriend. But I was too lazy to learn how to use it properly. And when I got an iPhone and started supplementing my photos using the iPhone, I realized that actually, I thought the lens on the iPhone took better wide-angle photos. So in 2011, I switched entirely to taking photos with my iPhone. And this is sort of a new breed of photographers of whom I'm sort of like the tail and flank, but we can call ourselves iPhonographers. Even Annie Leibovitz said that the camera in an iPhone is commensurate to anything that she has in her professional equipment. So I started out doing this because I was lazy, and then I found that luckily I was kind of justified in doing it. Eventually, over 3 years, I amassed enough photos for my collection, which I called Ain't That America Something to See? And those of you who grew up in the 80s will recognize the song reference, the John Cougar Mellencamp song. I really just think our country is so spectacular, and especially in a time of political polarization, it was especially important to me to collect these photos that show just how beautiful it is out there, and to expose people to the majesty of big weather and the beauty of the American landscape. So all my photos are weather and landscape photography. This is the first photo I ever set out to take deliberately. In January of 2011, some of you may remember that the National Weather Service issued a blizzard warning, and I decided that I was going to go blizzard chasing, even though I wasn't sure what kind of photos I would get in a whiteout. But as my pioneer ancestors might have said, nothing ventured, nothing gained, and so I set off with my iPhone, and I guess Mother Nature must have agreed with that philosophy, because she and this beautiful herd of buffalo halfway between Caledonia and Spring Grove provided me with this shot that I was going for a sort of Edward Curtis effect, and hopefully I got that. Didn't even get frostbite while I was getting this photo. Thank you. I love to hear this sort of like, oh. My partner is an extreme weather photographer who's really talented and very well known, named Jim Reed, and I've seen him give photo presentations, and I have my favorites of his photos, and when he puts them in the presentations and people go, oh, I said, see, I told you like that photo. Jim was actually with me when I shot this, again with my iPhone. We were on our way back from Denver to Wichita, where we now both are based. And we had just finished a storm chasing tour with Tempest, and on the way home, we caught this pretty little storm near Agate, Colorado. And Jim took out his big gun cameras. He's a Nikon-sponsored photographer, so he has his cameras with these, 3-foot lenses on them, and he started shooting the storm. And I was really bored because I wasn't very good at shooting lightning. So I took out my iPhone, and by accident, I realized that if you hold down the little camera icon when you're taking a photo with your iPhone, and you release it when you see what you want to take a photo of, in this case lightning, you can actually capture fast-moving stuff. So that's my iPhone lightning capture secret, which I'll just share with you. And that's how I got this shot. And Jim paid me the ultimate compliment of being jealous of this shot, and he still says to this day, I can't believe you got that with your iPhone. Mm-hmm. Yeah. This shot is of a very young tornado crossing the Red River from North Dakota into Minnesota, August 7th, 2010. It had been on the ground for about 5 minutes when I shot this, and it was on the ground for about 1 hour and 20 minutes, moving extremely slowly. The storm was going about 10 miles an hour, and you can see from the sun behind it that it was unaffected by any other storms. So we were able basically to stand in sunlight while shooting it. And it morphed from this shape, which is about as traditional as you can get, to one of the stretchy elephant trunk Wizard of Oz tornadoes. And then finally it roped out and became kind of like a little curly pigtail. And every time it went back up into the clouds, it would come back down. And you'd say, nope, it's finished, and it would come back down. Nope, it's finished, it would come back down. So it put on quite a show for us. Unfortunately, it was also an extremely destructive tornado classified by the National Weather Service as an EF4, which is the second highest rating you can get for destruction. And shortly after I took this photo, it destroyed a bee farm. So one of the reasons that I show this sometimes at spotters meetings is to say the size of the tornado doesn't matter. You would look at this and think, oh, it can't be that bad, but actually it was extremely destructive. This was taken from my front yard in Wichita. This was June 2012, I want to say, and most of the time when there's a storm like this moving toward our house, we're out chasing it, or at least out of its way. And this night, Jim left the house to go shoot the storm in the field, and he got a spectacular shot of it from farther away, beautiful green and purple nighttime photo. But I really wanted the experience of not looking at radar and not being in a vehicle, and instead just sitting in the yard and letting the storm roll over me like I used to when I was little. And in that way recapture some of the awe that I felt when I was a child, something that was this huge, watching it move toward me and reduce me to like ant size. So this is the leading edge of a severe thunderstorm, and it did look like a tidal wave, and the light in the upper part of the screen is lightning. It was the only way you could see the storm coming, was when the lightning lit up the sky. That was a pretty amazing experience. This guy I shot in July 2012 when I was a guide for Tempest Tours. It's taken in Faith, South Dakota. And a lot of people think that there's a tornado in the shot, but actually there isn't. And the big solid core that you see in the middle of the screen is the storm's precipitation shaft. Does anybody want to guess what that blue-green color is on the right side of the screen? Hail, exactly. My grandmother used to say that when she was growing up on the farm, the farmers feared a green sky, a sky this color. When you see a storm coming towards you and it's a sort of aqua glacial color, it means that the sun is reflecting off the ice in the storm. So when you see a sky this color, the storm contains some pretty large hailstones. This storm put down softball-sized hailstones. Luckily not on our vehicles. We're pretty good at keeping them out of the hail shaft, but once the storm had passed, we let everybody stop and get out and put hail in the coolers, and we had ice for our drinks that night. And it lasted for 5 hours, and it changed shapes and colors almost as if it were posing for us. So this is one of my favorite storms to chase and shoot. When you're shooting, you don't only shoot tornadoes and blizzards. We also shoot any extreme weather condition, and even though it's very hard to personify heat and drought, I thought these shots did it pretty well. This was last summer in Kansas. Kansas saw its worst drought in 50 years last summer, and despite all the precip we had this winter, it's still not over, with the result that a lot of the farmland looked like this, and the farmers were plowing their crops over in July and August, which was really dreadful to see. When I shot these, which I did at the Quivira Nature Preserve in south central Kansas, the soil is actually a lake bed, and obviously the lake is no longer there, and you could have dropped a spoon into one of those cracks and lost it. The tree actually was not stripped by drought. It was stripped by an EF4 tornado earlier last year on April 14th during a tornado outbreak. But it was having a really hard time coming back because of the extreme heat that we had last year. This is another lightning shot that I was really proud of, and I'm a little ashamed to say, but not really. I gloated over. Again, took it using the iPhone with the little camera device that I explained before. This is the same storm as the one I just showed you that dropped all the hail. So you can see how different a storm can be in color and shape just an hour later. This was taken near Midland, South Dakota, at a gas station. And I just love the combination of the lightning and the sunset colors, so I was really happy with this shot. So there's a funny story behind this shot, or at least it's funny to the people who were there watching me get it. In July 2011, I was chasing again with Tempest, and we were near Black Thunder Mine in Wyoming, and this beautiful sculpted supercell thunderstorm blew up over railroad tracks, and I asked the guides could they please stop the van because I really wanted to shoot the storm over the tracks. I love the perspective of the tracks going toward what we call the vanishing point in the photo, leading toward the sunset behind the storm, and also that little granary to the left. So I had my big old artistic vision, and I was so excited about it that when I got out of the van, I ran toward the tracks, fell over my own feet, tumbled spectacularly in front of a van full of people who had cameras. So there are a lot of accompanying photos of my hinder, as my grandmother would have called it, under this storm. And if you find my friends on Facebook who are with me on that tour, I'm sure they would be happy to share those hinder photos with you. But I did get my shot, darn it. Also, I should point out that Jim was with me on this tour. He ran past me with this camera and just kind of said, "You okay?" And then like stepped over me to take his own shot. So, it's ugly out there. It's competitive. This is a tornado from April 13th, 2010 near Hayfield, Minnesota. The storm started to tornado, we use that as a verb, about 50 miles west of Rochester, and this tornado was on the ground again for about an hour and a half. It started out as a big, thick cone, and then it became a thinner stovepipe, and then it turned into a big, white, spinning, fluffy thing that looked like a rotisserie chicken. And finally, here it is in what storm chasers call the rope-out stage. And the reason we call the tornado that when it's in its final stage of its life cycle is you can see it stretches out kind of like a rope. So when you see tornadoes make those really strange shapes, like the sort of silly putty, pulled out calisthenic shapes, it usually means the tornado is dying. It can still mean that it's dangerous. In fact, the little specks you might be able to see on the screen are corn that this tornado picked up as it went through a cornfield and pulled it all up into the air. But it didn't do any damage other than that. So we were able to get within 100 yards of it. It did not sound like a train. It sounded like a waterfall. And the little red taillights that you see in the lower right-hand corner of the screen are Hayfield, Minnesota law enforcement, who were all over this storm. I was happy to see. I promised Dawn that I would put in some shots from my recent Tempest tour, which I just came back from like 5 days ago. So I'm still like barely civilized because I've been in that little van that you see in the right-hand corner for 12 days with a lot of other people. This is a shot that I again took with my iPhone using a panorama app called 360. And this storm was about 20 miles north of Roswell, New Mexico. A lot of chasers call supercell thunderstorms that rotate and get this sort of sculpted look the mothership because they indeed look like big spaceships. So I like to call this storm with some poetic license my mothership over at Roswell. The coloring, thank you for laughing, that was very nice. The coloring of this is the red dirt in New Mexico being sucked up into the storm, and the really bright sort of banana finger looking outflow bands on the right hand side are from the sunlight hitting the dirt as it exits the storm. That was really one of my favorite shots of this recent tour. Although when I posted it on Facebook, many people chastised me for keeping the van and the people in. They were like, you should get rid of those distracting people. But to me, any photographer who's lucky enough to be near a storm with a camera can take a storm picture. To me, the van and the people add heart and personality. So I left us all in. This is another shot also from our trip taken on May 10th in Kansas, in southwestern Kansas. I was lying on my back in a field to get this shot because I really wanted both the windmill, thank you, and the pinwheel, the big pinwheel, and the storm's updraft base, which is that elephant foot shape. Again, the storm's updraft base, which just means where the hot air is being sucked in and feeding the storm, is this shape because it's rotating. So this was a tornado-warned storm when I took a picture of it. It did not produce a tornado for us, but it did produce this spectacular coloring, which is unfooled around with right at sunset. So there it is. I think every storm chaser has a sort of horror story where you think you know what you're doing, and then the storm shows you that you really don't. And Mother Nature always has tricks up her sleeve. My worst war story, which I transposed from my own life to put into Storm Chasers, was in Gove County, Kansas on May 22nd, 2008. And I can tell you that it's been etched and burned into my brain because I normally can't remember dates at all. I was out with Tempest. At that point, I was tailing them in my own vehicle, and it was the first time that I had ever been in a tornado outbreak situation, which actually is going on today in Kansas, where almost every storm that goes up has the potential to be not only severe, but tornadic. So one of the guides took me aside and said to me, you're a good driver, you've been chasing us for about 4 years, we can tell that you drive carefully and well, but today you're going to have to be extra careful because 5 seconds worth of hesitation or going too fast can mean the difference between safety and not safety. So I felt very chastened because it was the first time the guides had ever spoken to me so seriously about remaining alert. So We were doing our final fueling run before choosing our targeted storm. Storms are growing up all around us, looking like these big spaceships in the sky, basically ringing our location. And the tornado sirens start going off where we are, and I'm just finishing gassing up the car when one of the women who was riding with me said, "What is that in the tire?" And I looked down and it was a big spike embedded in the tire, and it had a head on it the size of a quarter with teeth, and it was just really firmly embedded in there. And I called the tour director over and said, "I don't know what I should do. Should I follow you guys, or with this tire, this nail in my tire, or should I stay here?" And he said, "It's your car, it's your decision." So I decided, given the chance that the gas station could easily be taken out by a tornado in the next few minutes, that I would follow the guides because they had the radar, and in that way I would be safe. So we drive off onto a dirt road, which many roads are in Kansas, and we're going toward this storm that has been tornado warned, and the radio is going wah, 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 issuing that emergency signal. And I looked up, and remember that photo I showed you of the mesocyclone that looked like an elephant's foot? It was basically at my 11 o'clock right over the vehicle, and I could see it rotating. And I said, "Wow, that thing looks like it's right on top of us." And at that very moment I heard, and I said, "What was that?" And my friend Marcia said, "That was our tire." So we were stuck on this road underneath a storm that was about to produce a tornado with a flat tire. Well, the tornado didn't have a flat tire. My mom was thinking that was really bad grammar. We had a flat tire under a mesocyclone that was about to produce a tornado, and I was so scared that I wasn't scared. I just kind of snapped into action. I radioed up to the guys. I'm a ham radio operator. I told you I was geeky. And I said, "Take the clients out of here. There's a farmhouse up about 200 yards on the left. It's abandoned. I'm gonna, get us into that farmhouse." And the Tempest guides ignored me, came back, did a NASCAR-like tire change on our vehicle, like throwing all the stuff that we had out into the rain, and by then the very large hail, changed our tire, and then we zoomed out of there right in time for that storm to start producing tornado after tornado after tornado. It was like a virtual carousel of tornadoes. There was a wedge, and there was a rope, and there was an elephant trunk one. And I stood there with my friends and the Tempest guides and felt absolutely nothing because I was in shock from having this experience. That night when we got to our motel, I bought the guides a case of beer as they were sitting in the Super 8 hot tub to thank them for helping us. And I said, "You guys really didn't have to do that. You put everybody in jeopardy. We would have taken shelter in the farmhouse." And one of the guides said to me, "Honey, that farmhouse isn't there anymore." So that was the closest I came, and it's a really good object lesson in humility, which I think a Stormchaser should always have. It's the best tool you can possibly have in your arsenal, because you can have as many weather apps as I do, which is like 11, warning apps, radar apps, whatever. You can plan your escape routes on a Google Maps thing. You can have an extra, thing of gas in your car and check your spare tires. There's always some weird contingency that can happen. So if you're not alert and you're not a little bit afraid, then you're in the wrong place. You really can never afford to get complacent. And so I do, I'm going to do a little commercial here, but I do urge you all, if you have a smartphone, to get weather warning apps on them, because storms come out of a clear blue sky. And if you don't, to get a little weather radio at Radio Shack, like mine costs $10, and just about every day in Kansas it goes, because we have another tornado warning. So, but they can really save your life, just these little things. This shot, which is the last one that I'm going to show you, is of a dying storm near Greensburg, Kansas. I don't know how many of you know about the town of Greensburg, but in May 2004, the town was utterly destroyed by the first EF5 tornado on record. It came at night. It was over a mile wide. People did have ample warning, so there weren't many fatalities with the storm, but the tornado was actually so powerful that it killed people even while they were in their basement shelters. The town was utterly destroyed, and I drove through there shortly after the tornado went through Greensburg, and I can verify that it looked as though a giant lawnmower had gone through the town and chopped everything off at shoulder height. There were no buildings, there were no streets, there were just piles of rubble and cars, and the trees were all whittled to these sharp points. And we thought, how could people ever rebuild here? But thanks to the ingenuity and the determination of the people of Greensburg. Not only did they rebuild their town, but they rebuilt it as Kansas's first green city. It's built entirely with eco-sustainable materials, and it's powered utterly by wind farms and by solar panels. And so we were chasing out last year in southwestern Kansas, right through Greensburg, which seems to be sort of a tornado target, and the storms died right as we got there. So this is a photo of a dying storm, and after I shot this photo, my mom and other people pointed out to me that there's an angel in it, which is the white cloud protruding from the storm. And so I like to think of this as the angel watching over Greensburg. That's the total of the photos that I'm going to show you for now, and I am delighted that you came to see them. I will be at the Bluff Country Artist Gallery this afternoon from 3 to 5. Some of the photos you just saw are on canvases that the gallery is selling, and I also put together photo books called Ain't That America, Something to See, which has these photos and a couple of more. And I'll be signing those and giving out postcards and doing everything but interpretive dance, so come and keep me company. Thank you for being such a great, great audience. Thank you.